So joining me now to discuss that, the markets, and other Bitcoin news is our Week in Review panel. CoinDesk Managing Editor of Technology, Christie Harkin, in the 6 in Toronto, and Managing Editor of Markets, Brad Keoun, in Austin, Texas. So the entire world turns its attention to Ukraine. What do you guys say? Good morning. Hey, Brad, how are you?
Hey, pretty good, Lawrence.
Hi, Christie.
It's morning where you
Brad.
are, Lawrence?
You know, it feels like every day is just, it's always morning. It's 8 a.m. somewhere in the world. How about that? So,
there we go.
So, Brad, we had a lot of market volatility, and it wasn't just in Bitcoin and alts. What's going on, man?
Well, we had this world-changing event this week. We don't have things like this that happen in the world very often. And, there's lots of geopolitical ramifications. We've seen big moves in commodities prices, might have implications for inflation. Obviously,
some crazy moves, right?
Major moves.
Pretty big ones, yeah. Yeah, it was oil, especially, obviously, because of energy.
Absolutely. But it also, it's going to hit the psychology of consumers, people reading these headlines, and they might feel anxious. But also, if we see, higher prices at the gas pump, you now have U.S. President Joe Biden talking about potentially wanting to release oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Something like this, really does have global ramifications. And one thing we've seen recently is Bitcoin, and Bitcoin really does, as has become increasingly a macro asset over the past couple of years. And, it's not only moving in response to these events, but people are also potentially seeing Bitcoin as maybe a player in the scene in terms of, if deeper sanctions on Russia might push Russia toward using crypto in some way or digital assets in some way, maybe one of the central bank digital currencies for payment. But so, it's, and Bitcoin prices have been down and back up, and we're just looking at the charts this morning, and they're down a little bit over the past week, but that belies kind of how big of a trip we've had this week.
Yeah, it might be a long time before we see central bank digital currencies. That was a topic that we discussed today on First Mover. To implement something like that, it's going to take a lot of work. But in the meantime, we have this weird situation right now, particularly in the U.S., where you have inflation as a worry. Potentially. We'll see what the Fed does. The market clearly expects the Fed is going to hold off on being so hawkish now compared to where it thought it was going to be even just a month ago. Yet you have an economy that could potentially get weak because of higher oil prices, higher energy prices, higher timber prices, you name it, it keeps going and going. So does that spell the possibility of stagflation? And what do you think that ultimately means for crypto?
It's so funny that you asked that question. I'm just talking with one of our reporters that word stagflation is really creeping in. It seems like it's becoming a buzzword. I've seen it in several reports, in my email over the past couple of days. But, we've been in a really uncertain state of the economy for the past few years. This is just going to be more of that, if the Fed is going to raise rates, if they were going to be super hawkish, and now there's this new kind of potentially negative effect on the economy. Now there's, as you say, per the chart of the day, there's some speculation that the Fed will slow down, or in some ways, this event does the Fed's work for it. As cynical as that sounds, that's kind of what people are looking at.
Yeah, I want to bring Christie in because speaking of this whole crisis in Ukraine, we've heard the narrative Bitcoin is uncensorable money. It's just been forever. Now, here we have the situation in Ukraine. Brad pointed out this could mean something for crypto as people look to either get their money out of Russia or get their money out of Ukraine, depending on how it goes with sanctions. So is this another stress test for that narrative, that uncensorable money narrative?
Yeah, that's the thing that I've been kind of thinking a lot about, especially since the events in Canada with the trucker convoy and people trying to donate there, and then addresses getting flagged by authorities in order to freeze funds. And of course, you can't freeze a Bitcoin address, but you can make it difficult for people to cash them out on the off ramps through cryptocurrency exchanges. And I think that it's all becoming an interesting stress test for Bitcoin. Are we there yet? And I think that's sort of the question that a lot of people have been asking. What is it going to take in order to make Bitcoin truly uncensorable? How can we move money around on the Bitcoin blockchain, which is transparent, and make it possible to sort of evade the sanctions that authorities want to impose? And that's a knife that cuts both ways, because sometimes we want to be able to catch the money moving if it's for a cause we don't like, or if there's some sort of legal issue. On the other hand, we want people to have the freedom to escape from oppressive regimes. So I think that is what developers are still looking at. And I think it's kind of interesting that it happened at a point where we're starting to get the tools in place. Following Taproot, for example, there's all kinds of privacy stuff that is going to be implemented, or that can be implemented in following upgrades to Bitcoin because of Schnorr signatures, which I've talked a lot about on the show. But we're not there yet. They haven't been implemented. The developers haven't had a chance to create the tools yet that are going to make things more private. And then we also have coin joins, which have been in the news a lot lately. Coin joins is like a mixing property where you can you put in your Bitcoins and you mix them up, the transactions, with a bunch of other Bitcoin transactions, and then it's really hard when it comes out the other end to figure out where those transactions come from. And there has been talk of Chainalysis and CipherTrace, other blockchain analytics companies, being able to actually trace these transactions. And part of that is, first, there are some improvements that need to be made in the technology. It's not super user-friendly, so people don't know how to coin join properly to preserve their privacy. The UI has just not been great, although Join Markets has apparently a new one in the works. It's going to make it a lot easier. And there's more stuff coming from developers who are, for example, Musig is a process that uses Schnorr signatures and allows groups of signatories to produce joint signatures in a joint message, and it's hard to tell who did what. And there's cross-input signature aggregation coming that is going to make coin joins cheaper and easier to use, and hopefully more people will use it, which makes the big pot of mixed up transactions even bigger, which makes it even harder to trace transactions. So there's a lot of stuff happening, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, so let's step back for a second, because Canada, besides being the only other place where you can get decent Ukrainian food, where do we see the similarities here, in the sense of over the next couple of weeks, how these play out, these two particular situations play out in Canada, where it's stopping let's say the truckers from receiving funds using crypto, and in Russia and Ukraine, where it's either stopping oligarchs from getting their money out of the West, or stopping or helping Ukrainians receive funds using crypto when all their other communications are cut off. So where do you see this playing out? How do you see these two situations playing out in the short term, at least?
Well, yeah, it's actually three situations when you look at it, because the first one, getting money to Ukraine in order, there are some fundraisers that have already collected, I think, quite a few Bitcoins to help various causes to support the Ukrainian people. And that is great, because it is global and it makes it easy. And it's not supporting, you don't have to worry about whether or not a centralized fundraising platform is going to allow it, or if it falls in the parameters of acceptable use, you can just do it. And Bitcoin does actually enable that. And we don't have governments yet who are trying to sanction the flow of funds into to support those people. On the other hand, yeah, the Russian oligarchs, Putin, for example, they are trying to get their funds to themselves that are from all over, that they've got all over the world. And there are lots of different ways that they're trying to do that. There's an excellent article in, let me see, it was in, I think it was it New York Times? I think it was. And they were talking about all the various ways that Putin could potentially use cryptocurrencies, going through dark markets. That's a really, I mean, that's an option. There's the option of using cryptocurrencies through ransomware, malware, and getting them that way. So there are lots of strategies in place that he could use, that Putin could use. And then with the truckers, we had the last mile problem of trying to actually get the funds to truckers themselves, and trying to balance transparency with anonymity is really hard, because the people who collected the money wanted to prove that they were giving it to the truckers, and in doing so, they posted videos of who they were giving. They kind of doxed everybody. So on one hand, yay, transparency. On the other hand, that doesn't actually help in terms of, you know, not making it traceable. So there's a lot of bugs that need to be worked out.
Well, we'll keep an eye on the NFT market, and if we notice any spikes, we could start to question whether or not that's some money laundering going on there.